Just seeing how much time I have left. Hello. So towards the end of last year, I was looking at the Pink News site because there was this really cool dance on Strictly. I don't know if any of you are as uncool as me and love watching Strictly. Not ashamed of it. So as I scroll down the article, I'm presented with reams of clickbait. Sponsored posts. Things like Cork, want to get the latest Vista hearing? 25 celebs you didn't realize are gay. Number 8 will surprise women. Drink this before going to bed to help burn belly fat. The clickbait in itself is actually quite revealing. Like, through its chosen topics alone, it knows I'm in Cork or around Cork. It knows the broad subject matter of the website, the content that I'm viewing. It suspects I'm a woman. And, well, who doesn't feel targeted by clickbait ads about belly fat? This clickbait is provided to Pink News by Taboola. This is Taboola. And I work on blocking trackers with a privacy tool called Better Blocker. And we've looked into Taboola. In our crawls of the most popular sites on the web, we found Taboola on nearly 5% of all sites. Taboola's aim is to drive marketing results by targeting your audience when they are most receptive to new messages. And you can do that with their data-rich recommendations. Ensure that your brand reaches interested people by leveraging the massive amounts of user data powering the Taboola engine. And they provide a handy graphic here on their website showing some of the kinds of information that might be useful about a site's visitor, like their device and their operating system, but also whether they're in the market for a car or fashion or an electric bike, whether they have an interest in pets or the environment or entertainment or science and tech. And so I scroll down to Taboola's privacy policy because I'm the kind of bore that does that. And I want to see how they know this information about me or how they guess this information about me and what they actually intend to do with it. And they seem to have a specific policy for third-party online advertising. And so theirs is a third-party tool that's used on Pink News, so I go to that. They say, we automatically collect user information when users interact with our services that appear on our customers' websites and digital properties. Taboola connects only pseudonymized data, which means we do not know who you are because we do not know or process your name, email address, or other identifiable data. Let's debunk this for a second. Pseudonymized or anonymized data isn't. It doesn't mean you're unidentifiable, despite the fact that privacy policies for years and years and years have been insisting that this is actually the case. As Bruce Schneier said over a decade ago in Wired, it takes only a small named database, like a database containing names, for someone to pry the anonymity of a much larger anonymous database. All they need is to compare a few data points, see which are similar, guess that that's you. And a recent study, and it's not the only study, into methods to re-identify individuals from anonymized data sets found that 99.98% of Americans would be correctly re-identified in any data set using just 15 demographic attributes. So they're attributes like your age, your gender, your ethnicity, your postcode, the number of children you have, the number of cars you own, your location, your status updates, and your results on a personality quiz. So returning back to Taboola's privacy policy, I want to know how the interest that Taboola infers compares to those kinds of demographic attributes. Taboola themselves describe them as data segments. And a data segment is a grouping of users who share one or more attributes. For example, travel enthusiasts. And we offer a number of data segments, both proprietary and from our data partners. Kindly, they provided a link to their data partners, so I went to have a look at that. And now 2 of these data partners stand out to me in particular. Axiom, and Oracle. And that's because this very cool organization called Cracked Labs have done multiple reports into the personal data that corporations collect and combine and analyze and trade and use, and the data brokers that deal in that data, featuring two of the biggest data brokers, Oracle and Axiom. And according to Cracked Labs, Axiom provides up to 3,000 attributes and scores on 700 million people in the US, Europe, and other regions. And Oracle sorts people into thousands of categories and provides more than 30,000 attributes on 2 billion consumer profiles. So they've probably got profiles on each of us. So what are these attributes and these categories? So I've picked out some of the best bits from this infographic because there is no way you could read any of that. One of nearly 200 ethnic codes. Your political views, your relationship status, your income, the details about your bank and insurance policies, the type of home you have, including if your home is a prison, the likelihood of whether you're planning to have a baby or adopt a child, the number and age of your children, your purchases, including whether a person bought pain relief products, perhaps, whether a person is likely to have an interest in the Air Force or the Army or the Navy, lottery, sweepstakes, or gay and lesbian movies. Your search history, including whether a person searched about abortion, legalizing drugs or gay marriage, protests, strikes, boycotts, or riots, and the likelihood that a person is a social influencer or is socially influenced. Taboola says it does not knowingly create segments that are based upon what we consider to be sensitive information. So helpfully, Taboola also provides a very detailed list of all their apparently not sensitive standard health-related segments. I've picked out some that really made me kind of boggle. They're quite personal. Active health management, far below average. Health, I have no confidence in the healthcare system. Family and parenting, motherhood, artificial insemination. First sign of pain, I take medicine. So these are all categories they could put us in. Health and fitness, addiction. Health and fitness, disorders, panic and anxiety. Personality, dealing with stress, bottled up. Or dealing with stress, emotional. Or dealing with stress, looking for a quick fix. This isn't exactly the kind of information you want marketers to use to sell to you. It is personal. And personality attributes were also used by Cambridge Analytica. And they collected them through a personality test app on Facebook. And they also harvested the profiles of all of the participants' friends and their friends' friends. Users were scored on big 5 personality traits. They did the test because they want to know what their scores are. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And in exchange, 40% of the people who took the test consented access to their Facebook profiles. And Cambridge Analytica itself claimed to be able to analyze huge amounts of consumer data and combine that with behavioral science to identify people whose organizations can target with marketing material. It's profiling. And Cambridge Analytica was a venture of SCL Elections, whose expertise was in psychological operations, or PSYOPs, changing people's minds not through persuasion, but through informational dominance, a set of techniques that includes rumor, disinformation, and fake news. That's targeting. And the same SCL worked with Steve Bannon on the Trump election campaign. And as this neat graphic from The Guardian shows, SCL's venture, Cambridge Analytica and Aggregate IQ, worked on multiple Brexit Leave campaigns. We as citizens could have been manipulated by profiling and targeting. And this is all the topic of a recent documentary on Netflix called The Great Hack, which I would recommend, especially if you don't really fancy reading anything and you want to just watch something instead. And it's also very accessible to people who aren't technically minded. And it means it's not exaggerating to say that tracking affects democracy. And this is just one of the ways. And if we use tracking, we have to consider its ethical implications. And I could talk about this in depth for way longer, but I really don't have the time. So if you want to read, I would recommend the book Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. And it's very dense, but it contains both the history and the predicted future of these massive, complex surveillance systems. Shoshana Zuboff coined the term surveillance capitalism and describes it in the book. Surveillance capitalism unilaterally claims human experience as free raw material for translation into behavioral data. Although some of these data are applied to product or service improvement, the rest are fabricated into prediction products that anticipate what you will do now, soon, and later. And if you took one look at the size of that book and thought, maybe not, there's actually a really good podcast with Adam Buxton, an interview with Shoshana Zuboff that I would recommend listening to. Many people use the argument that profiling and targeting is okay because it makes technology so convenient for the majority of us. But I think convenient exploitative technology is like fluffy handcuffs. They may look cute and fluffy, they might lead to some fun, but they're still handcuffs, and you want to have access to the keys. So how can we protect ourselves as individuals? Let's look at a few of the things we could do. 1, avoid logging in if we can, so if you're watching a video on YouTube. However, many platforms will still track you via fingerprinting, and these are a combination of identifiers unique to your browser that act as a fingerprint, like your browser height and width, the device that you're using, or ironically, whether you have the Do Not Track settings set. In 2015, Facebook even filed a patent saying it could identify people who might know each other because they appear in photos taken by the same camera. They identify that camera by identical scratches and dust on the lens. Avoid providing your phone number to these platforms. So a lot of people will recommend using two-factor authentication to prevent nefarious strangers from getting into your accounts, and I would agree with that. However, you have to be aware that using your phone number is quite risky for this kind of authentication, for many reasons, but specifically here. A study found that Facebook used those phone numbers you were providing for security purposes for targeted advertising. They found that we added and verified a phone number for two-factor authentication to one of the author's accounts, and that phone number became targetable by advertising after 22 days. And not long ago, Twitter, of course, admitted they did exactly the same thing. When an advertiser uploaded their marketing list, we may have matched people on Twitter to their list based on the email or phone number the Twitter account holder provided for safety and security purposes. Whoopsie daisy. Disallow cookies in your browser preferences. So the thing is, if we block cookies, which is quite a straightforward way of preventing quite a lot of tracking, many sites do just fall to pieces, usually silently as well. It would be nice if developers accounted for those situations, but nah. Even if we only block cookies from third-party sites, if a site relies on that third party for anything persistent, so it could be your login, your shopping basket, a particular preference, well, that will break as well. Don't use Gmail. Your email not only contains all of your communication, but the receipts for everything you've bought, the confirmations of every event you've signed up for, and every platform and newsletter and service that you've joined. And if you're logged in with Chrome, it will log with all of that as well. From our crawls of the web for BetterBlocker, we discovered Google has its tentacles in around 80% of the most popular websites on the web. Think about all of the information Google can extract from those sites. Though if your friends and family use Gmail, you're stuck. And likewise, your choices affect your friends and family. And these are all choices once we can make on the web, but we need to be aware of other places that we're tracked too. Google Nest knows everything about your home. Amazon Ring and Alexa can hear everything you say and spy on your neighbors for you. Hello Barbie knows all your kids' secrets. A smart pacifier, you could put a chip in your baby. Of course, it was only a matter of time before they made a smart menstrual cup. Not to mention the smart tampon. This attaches to your waist. The cord, a belt on your waist. I can't even. And let's not forget the smart dildo. WeConnect, who made the smart dildo, were actually sued for tracking their users' habits. And have you ever wondered how many calories you're burning during intercourse, and how many thrusts, and the speed of your thrusts, and the duration of your sessions and their frequency, and how many different positions you use in the period of a week, month, or year? Well, you want the eye condom. And have you ever wanted to share all of that information with advertisers and insurers and possibly the government and who knows else? Avoiding it all seems like a lot of work, right? I mean, I know, I advocate for privacy, and I don't have the time or the resources to protect myself all of the time. And that's why it's really unfair to blame the victim for having their privacy eroded. Not to mention that our entire concept of privacy is being twisted by the same people who have an agenda to erode it. And one of the biggest culprits in attempting to redefine privacy is Facebook. Here's a Facebook ad that's been recently showing on TVs. It shows a person undressing behind towels, held up by her friends on the beach, alongside the Facebook post visibility options that might be familiar to you if you post on Facebook. The options of public, friends, only me, and close friends, explaining how, well, we all have different privacy preferences in life. And it ends the whole advert by saying, there's a lot of ways to control your privacy settings on Facebook. It doesn't mention that friends and only me and close friends should really read friends and Facebook, only me and Facebook, and close friends and Facebook, because you're never really sharing anything or something with only me on Facebook. Facebook Incorporated has access to everything that you share on Facebook. And privacy is the ability to choose what you want to share with others and what you want to keep to yourself. Facebook shouldn't be trying to tell us otherwise and making out that it's a difference between public and private. Google also has an interesting interpretation of privacy. 10 years ago, Eric Schmidt, the then CEO of Google, now the executive chairman of Alphabet, which is Google's parent corporation, famously said, if you have something you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. And I hear a lot of people saying this. The thing is, would they be comfortable with sharing their own uncleared browser history? Do we need to be smart about what we share publicly? Sure. Don't go posting photos of your credit card or your home address. Maybe it's unwise to share the photo of you blackout drunk the week before you have an interview. Perhaps we should take responsibility for something awful that we say to another person online. But this isn't about what we knowingly share publicly. And right now, these corporations are more than happy to blame us for our loss of privacy. They say, we agreed to the terms and conditions. We should read the privacy policies. It's our fault. And it's been a problem for a long time. It was the subject of a documentary made way back in 2013 called Terms and Conditions May Apply, covering the ridiculous length and legalese in terms and conditions and how we couldn't possibly read them for every service we use. And more recently, an editorial op-ed in the New York Times pointed out the flaws in privacy policies for consent. They said the clicks that pass for consent are uninformed, non-negotiated, and offered in exchange for services that are often necessary for civic life. And there are studies that speak to how difficult it is to understand these policies too. Like 2 law professors analyzed the sign-in terms and conditions of 500 popular US websites, including Google and Facebook, and they found that more than 99% of them were unreadable. And on top of that, they far exceeded the level most American adults read at, but yet are still enforced. It's not informed consent when you can't understand the terms. And how can we even truly consent when we don't even know how our information can be used against us? It's also not true consent if it's not a real choice. We're not asked who should be allowed access to our information, and how much, and how often, and for how long, and when. Like this fresh hell from Huffington Post. And they've got this because of the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, that requires that you ask for consent before you track a person. So I go to read a post on their site. And being me, I don't just click OK, I say Manage Options. So selecting Manage, I'm presented with this screen here, which has a load more text that's not very easy to read. And in tiny little bit of text, it says Manage again. So I go Manage. And then it's got more of the same blah, 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 blah. It's repeating the same stuff over and over again about how they're working with their partners and how they respect your privacy. And so there's an option to see and customize which partners, see how partners use your data. I'll look at that. And this time I have a blue box with white text instead. Tiny text saying blah, 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 nonsense, really hard to read and understand. No actual options there at all. So I go back and I select the option to see and customize which partners can use your data. Okay, that sounds like what I want. I go to that. I don't have any options. I have a list of the third parties that they're using and links to their privacy policies. Now, if I go to their privacy policies, what do I find? Nothing referring to third-party use and no options for controlling my data. Delightful. So there's nothing I can do with this consent. At no point was there a choice for me. Nothing that even resembles consent. Just a lot of text saying the same thing over and over again until I give up and just select OK. And incidentally, these interfaces have already been ruled not compliant by the GDPR. So we're asked to give up everything or get nothing. And that is not a real choice. And it's certainly not a real choice when the cost of not consenting is to lose access to social, civil, and labor infrastructure. There's a recent paper by Jan Fernbach and Gwen Schaffer called Cell Phones, Security, and Social Capital, and it examines the privacy trade-offs that disproportionately affect mobile, mostly internet users. Incidentally, of course, that very much affects mostly lower-income, non-white people. And what they found shows the cost of not giving consent. Speaking about this paper, Gwen Schaffer explained, all individuals are vulnerable to security breaches, identity fraud, system errors, and hacking, but economically disadvantaged individuals who rely exclusively on their mobile phones to access the internet are disproportionately exploited. Some focus groups participants reported that in an effort to maintain data privacy, they modify online activities in ways that harm personal relationships and force them to forego job opportunities. And if you're one of the people who thinks, well, I wouldn't do that and I don't do that, you have the advantages. The technology we use is our new everyday things. It forms all of that vital social, civil, and labor infrastructure. And as largely quite helpless consumers, there's often not much we can do to protect ourselves without a lot of free time and a lot of money. And when the technology you use is a lifeline to access, you are impacted more severely by its exploitative factors. And Natalie mentioned this on the panel earlier. 2 years ago, Dr. Frances Ryan covered this in her article, The Missing Link: Why Disabled People Can't Afford to #delete Facebook. So after the Cambridge Analytica scandal was uncovered, loads of people were saying, oh, #delete Facebook. But as Dr. Ryan pointed out, I can't help but wonder if only privileged people can afford to take a position of social media puritanism. For many, particularly people from marginalized groups, social media is a lifeline, a bridge to a new community, a route to employment, and a way to tackle isolation. And like so many of these issues that we have with technology, what we're dealing with is the underlying social and systemic issues. And as technologists, we often can't help ourselves trying to fix or smooth over problems using more technology. But technology can't fix those issues of domination or oppression or discrimination. And technology actually makes many of these issues far worse. And we can and we do amplify and speed up systemic issues with technology. Mike and Annie recently made a point in this article about tech platforms that we still seem to operate with this notion that online life is somehow separate and a different life detached from our everyday existence. And tech platforms often take advantage of that notion by suggesting, oh, well, if you don't like the technology, just, log out, log off, go be mindful or some shit. The thing is, people with this mindset show how shallow they are by saying if you don't like the technology, you don't have to use it. How many times have you heard someone say that about technology when you've complained about it? But we can't escape technology. As Mike said, platforms are societies of intertwined people and machines. There is no such thing as online life versus real life. We give massive ground if we pretend that these companies are simply having an effect or an impact on some separate society. Which brings me to another issue rife in technology today: technology colonialism. And Antoine Simmons wrote a long and detailed article about this 5 years ago on Model View Culture. He started with some history, and I know that we don't really get taught colonial history in this country. Colonial powers always saw themselves as superiors over the native people whose culture was rarely recognized or respected. Sound familiar? The colonizers saw economic value in foreign relations, but it was always viewed as a transaction based on inequality. Colonial powers always saw themselves, I just said that bit, and then comparing it to what we so often do in technology. Technology companies continue this same philosophy in how they present their own products. These products are almost always designed by white men for a global audience with little understanding of the diverse interests of end users. It's exactly what Liz was talking about. And we have to reckon with our colonial history. I mean, sure, this speaks to us politically too, but today I'm talking about our tech industry and our tech community. We have to reckon with the colonial way in which we've created technology. We don't speak to users. Instead, we use analytics and data to design interfaces to people we will never try to speak to or ask if they ever even wanted what we were designing in the first place. We'll assume we know best because we are the experts and they are just users. We don't have diverse teams. We barely even try to involve people with backgrounds that are different from our own because cultural fit. And we fetishize our tools, valuing the experience of the designer and developer over that of the people who use what we build. And we can say that we had the right intentions, but that truly means nothing. And as the wonderful Tatiana, who is going to give the closing keynote today, says in many of her talks and much of her writing, she invokes the phrase, intent does not erase impact. Because that describes how haphazardly we approach designing technology. We're just like, sorry, I didn't mean to, and I think that makes it all okay. Not only do we have the responsibility to design more rights-respecting technology, but to consider the impact our design has outside of its immediate interface. And as the people advocating for some kind of change, we can't exactly go around telling people to stop using this exploitative technology if there aren't any alternatives, if there aren't any rights-respecting alternatives. And that's where all of us come in. As the people who work in technology and who create technology, we have far more power for change, and we can encourage more rights-respecting practice, and we can build alternatives. So how do we build rights-respecting technology? As an antidote to big tech, we need small tech. We need everyday tools for everyday people designed to increase human welfare and, importantly, not corporate profits. And sure, that can sound a bit lofty, but there are some practical ways to approach it. First of all, make it easy to use. Plenty of privacy-respecting tools exist for people who want to protect themselves, and I use some of them. But we mustn't make protecting ourselves a privilege, only available to those who have the knowledge and the time and the money. And it's why we must make easy-to-use technology that is functional, and this includes accessible, because if it's not accessible, then it is not functional. That's convenient, and that's reliable. We need to make it inclusive. We must ensure that people have equal rights and access to the tools we build and the communities who build them, with a particular focus on including people from traditionally marginalized backgrounds. Currently, privacy-respecting tools, and honestly, most of our tools, are terrible at this, not building any kind of inclusive technology, and often surrounding themselves with incredibly toxic communities. We don't want to be colonial. Our teams should reflect the intended audience of our technology. If we can't build teams like this, which sure, if you work in a tiny team of a few people, that's going to be tricky. We must ensure that people with different needs can take what we make and specialize it for their needs, because we do not know better than them. We can build upon the best practices that we've learned and the best ways to do particular things and the shared experience of others, but we should not be making assumptions about what is suitable for an audience that we are not a part of. We need to make it personal. We've got to stop our infatuation with growth and greed. Focus on building personal technology for everyday people. Not spending all our focus, not wasting all of our focus and our experience and our money on tools for startups and enterprises. We need to make it private by default. And I'm saying it again because the more I say it, I'm going to try and undo Facebook's attempts at privacy washing. Privacy is the ability to choose what you want to share with others and what you want to keep to yourself. We need to make our technology function without people's personal information. You don't need to know a person's gender to provide them with a service. You don't need analytics that segment people into stereotypes based on guesswork. Allow people to share information for relevant functionality only with their explicit consent. And when obtaining people's consent, tell a person how you'll use their information, when you'll use it, who will have access to it, and how long you will keep that information stored. And this has recently become established as a requirement under the GDPR specifically for cookies. Write easy-to-understand privacy policies. It's not that difficult. Don't just copy and paste them from another service, because I know that a lot of you have done this. Those people probably copied and pasted them in the first place. We end up in this whole circle of absolute nonsense. No one actually understands what they're saying. And ensure your privacy policy is kept up to date when you update your technology. Don't use third-party consent frameworks. Most of them aren't GDPR compliant. They're awful experiences for your visitors, and they may well get you into legal trouble as well. I mean, don't use third-party services at all if you can avoid them. They present a risk to both you, legally, and to your users. And if you do use third-party services, It's your responsibility to know their terms and their policies and what they are collecting. Don't just be copying and pasting some JavaScript into your page. You should know what they're doing and hold them to account. And if you use third-party scripts or content delivery networks and videos and images and fonts, self-host them wherever you can. Ask the providers if it's unclear whether they do self-hosting options. It's probably worth mentioning a little bit of social media etiquette here. If you know how, strip the identifying junk and Google AMP junk away from URLs before you share them on the social platforms. Friends don't let corporations invade their friends' privacy. And if you feel you need a presence, like a social media presence or a blogging platform, don't make it the only option. Post to your own site first, and then mirror those posts on third-party platforms for the exposure that you want, so that people have the option to choose between the platform or your own site. And your basic blog is way better than Medium. Make it zero knowledge. So zero knowledge tech has no knowledge of your information. It might store a person's information, but the people who make or host the tech can't access it. They can't access it even if they wanted to. Keep a person's information on their own device where possible. And if a person's information needs to be synced to another device, ensure their information is end-to-end encrypted, with only that person having access to decrypt it. The adage is true: the cloud is just somebody else's computer. And we also have to take care with how we share our technology and how we sustain its existence. We need to make it share alike. We need to cultivate a healthy commons by using licenses that allow others to build upon and contribute back to our work. Now, we might think that that's what we're doing with a lot of open source, but a lot of the time what we're doing is we're building things, we're letting big tech come in, use it, take it, do their own thing, and not give anything back to the commons. And we also have to take care with how we share our technology and how we sustain its existence. Maybe make it non-commercial. Support stay-ups, not startups. So my partner, Aral Bulkan, coined the term stay-ups. I mean, he didn't realize that there was a Huggies product called stay-ups, but sure. For the anti-startup. We don't need more tech companies aiming to fail fast or be sold as quickly as possible. We need long-term, sustainable technology that we can hold to account. And support not-for-profit technology. There's not much out there, but support it. If we're building sustainable technology for everyday people, we need compatible funding models, not venture capital or equity-based investment. And it may feel difficult or even impossible to build technology with these criteria, and especially within our current employers and our current organizations. It probably is. But there are steps we can take to give ourselves the opportunity to build more rights-respecting technology. Even just using small technology as a criteria when you're looking for your next project or job, if you feel that you can't do anything where you are. Seek alternatives to the software and the products that you use every day. Switching.software is a really good site, a great list of resources by people who really care about ethical technology as well as ease of use. So they have good lists of alternatives. And if you can't do it at work, do it at home. If you have the time, make a personal website. Practice small technology on your own projects. And we're trying to build some tools to help people do this without compromising their site's visitors. This is just a thing called Site.js. We're building it so you can build a secure personal website without all of that configuration and without relying on a third-party service who might start tracking all of your visitors without your consent or pivot to a dodgy business model. We've all seen that happen. And obviously, it's free and open technology. And it even runs on a Raspberry Pi if you like the idea of holding a portable server in your hand running on 4G, which is actually, if you think about it, if you're thinking about censorship and protests and riots and things like that, it could be very valuable. And of course, there's no tracking. It has an ephemeral server statistics to see which pages are popular and which links are broken and things like that, but it doesn't track the site's visitors. It's a tiny, tiny tool in a world of choice, but it is an alternative. I've been speaking about tracking and privacy for about 7 years, and luckily it's becoming a lot more mainstream nowadays, and that's a good thing. But I've been heckled by a very loyal Google employee. I've been called a tinfoil hat-wearing ranter by a Facebook employee. I've had people tell me that there just isn't any other way, and that I'm just trying to impede the natural progress of technology. As Rose Everett wrote in a recent article on Vox, the assertion that technology companies can't possibly be shaped or restrained with the public's interest in mind is to argue that they are fundamentally different from any other industry. They're not. We're not that special. And we can't keep making poor excuses for bad practices. We need to divest ourselves from exploitative organizations. Consider, who are we financially supporting or implicitly endorsing when we recommend their work and their products? I'm sorry, I don't give a fuck if all the cool shit coming out of your company, if your company is being exploitative. You're not examples to be held above others. If your work is hurting our world, you shouldn't be contributing to that. And our whole approach matters. It's not just about our philosophy or how we build technology. Our approach to being part of communities that create technology. And you might be thinking, I'm just one person, one tiny person. What can I do? But we are an industry, and we are communities, we are organizations and unions. We are groups made up of many persons. And if we work together on this, we could have a huge impact. We have to remember that we're more than just the organization we work for. If you work for a big corporation that does exploitative things, you probably didn't make the decision to do that thing. But I think the time has come where we can no longer unquestioningly defend our employers or our clients. We need to use our social capital. We need to be the change we want to exist. And there are different roles we can take on in making that change happen. Roles that fit us differently depending both on our privilege but also our position within an organization. So for one, be independent. We've got to be comfortable being different. We can't just follow other people's leads when those other people aren't being good leaders. Don't look to heroes who could let you down. Don't be loyal to big corporations who don't care anything for you. Be the advisor. Do the research on inclusive and rights-respecting technology and make recommendations to others. Make it harder for them to make excuses. Be the advocate. Marginalized folks shouldn't have to risk themselves and their positions to make change. Advocate for others. The overrepresented should advocate for the underrepresented. Be the questioner. Question the defaults. Ask, why has it been chosen to be made this way in the first place? Try asking a startup how it really makes its money, if it really makes any money at all. Be the gatekeeper. When advocacy isn't getting you far enough, use your expertise to prevent exploitative things from happening on your watch. Be difficult. Be the person who is always known for bringing up the issue. Embrace the awkwardness that comes with your power. Call out questionable behavior. And be unprofessional. Don't let anybody tell you that standing up for the needs of yourself or for others is unprofessional. And don't let people tell you to be quiet or that you'll get things done if you're a bit nicer or you smile a bit more while you speak. Be the supporter. If you're not comfortable speaking up, and I know a lot of people aren't, at least be there for those who do. Remember that silence is complicity. Speaking up is risky and it's hard. And it can be really, really fucking lonely. And we're often fighting entities that are way bigger than ourselves, and our lives and our ability to make a living are very much at risk. But letting technology continue this way is riskier, like society and democracy riskier. People tend to say that the talks I give are scary, but I'm not here to scare you. I'm just here because I want to tell you that we deserve better. Thank you.